You hear me? I think we're.
Yeah, I can talk generalizations. I don't, I don't know the players.
All right. Well, I can introduce them shortly.
I know Nicole. I know the Ontario players a bit.
And we are live. Welcome back to the 2018 Canadian Lawn Bowling Championships. I'm Jake Shuknick, joined by Ian Howard. How are you doing today, Ian?
Good, Jake. How are you?
I am excellent.
Well, you had the morning session with Terry Scott, and I hope that went well for you.
Yeah, it went really well this morning. New Tech actually worked out okay. So we did women's pairs this morning. We got women's pairs here, and round 3 will also be women's pairs. That's all who's on rink B1 here. So we have Quebec, which is, let me find the team here, Susan Hill and Anne Morissette versus Saskatchewan B, which is Sydney Boyd and Lorraine Layton. So the skips are Sydney Boyd for Saskatchewan and Susan Hill for Quebec, and then the leads are Lorraine Layton for Saskatchewan and Anne Morissette for Quebec.
Very good.
And looking at the standings from this morning based off of round 1, it looks like both these women's teams were on the losing side of game 1. You can find the standings on bowlscanada.com under the Canadian Championship tab, but looks like Quebec lost to Nova Scotia A 19-9, and Saskatchewan B lost to Alberta B 24-9.
And are we still using the word losing, or are we transferring the word to learning?
I think learning is a much better option. Good call on that. Well, that looks like a pretty good bowl there from Lorraine.
So sometimes I find that when you're down in the game and you don't get all the job done, somewhere along the line you might have got the job done. That's why I kind of, when I'm playing with my team, I say, well, we learned something today. Maybe it's just my aversion to the word losing.
So this is going to be a very confusing head, just based on the fact that there's 3 sets of green bowls and 1 set of red bowls. Mm-hmm. So based off of how Lorraine's rolled her, she has white dimples. That might be a easy way to tell.
That'll certainly help. On the second rink over, Jake, who do we have there?
The rink next door. That's also women's pairs. So we have Ontario and Alberta. I believe it's also Ontario B and Alberta B. Let me double check the draw here before I tell you the wrong thing. Women's pairs, yes, Ontario B and Alberta B. So Ontario B is, I think you actually are familiar with 1 or 2 of those players.
Yes, I am, yes. I've played against both of them in the Ontario Premier League. And can't recall right now who got the better of the other, but they both very fine bowlers. The people from Alberta, I don't know, Jake. Perhaps.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I can fill you in on that. The one standing down at the head right now, which I guess nobody can see that on TV, but we can, is Pat Voss, and she is the executive director for Bowls Alberta. Mm-hmm. So I end up emailing her on a semi-regular basis, and she is bowling with Cecilia Gillespie. Hope I didn't butcher that last name. I've heard that word pronounced so many different ways.
Which word is that again?
Gillespie. Gillespie, yeah.
That works for me. Do you have any idea what the temperature is here today? It's a beautiful day.
It is absolutely gorgeous out.
It's pretty hot.
My guess would be close to 30, but you know what? Let's check the old weather app.
Well, I might have that here. Let's come to think of it.
But yeah, it's very, very warm here. I was told to bring a sweater because they say it's very cold in the mornings, but definitely don't need that in the day.
No. Well, I have to change this. I have New South Wales, New York.
We can tell you the temperature around the world.
Yeah. That's very often the case, having to do business around the world these days. What happened to Regina? Okay, we have Regina here, and according to the temperature on the iPhone, it's 31 degrees, which is
nice and toasty.
For those that want it in Fahrenheit, I just have to.
I'm going to guess somewhere around 87 or 90.
Very good guess, Jake. 88.
88, okay.
31 degrees centigrade and 88 Fahrenheit.
The only reason I know that is because 28 is 82. So then they're backwards. After that, it's all guesswork.
It's that fertile brain. It's always working.
Yowza. That was a 6 for Saskatchewan to start the game.
Wow. I don't know about you, Jake, but I find if you the first score like that, you've got to chip away, and it's a tough one.
What's interesting about that is that since it's 3 bowl pairs, that was actually a perfect end. That was actually every bowl, so they are eligible for a perfect end pin if they want to send us the scorecard, and $5 per pin. Being here in Regina, I've heard quite a few of the volunteers, the locals, are very supportive of Sydney in the rain, whether they're just friends or family, I'm not sure. But I've had several people come up and say, oh, we're so proud of these two for being here. We're going to be cheering them on. So they've got definitely got home support here, anyway, if nothing else.
What's interesting, the Saskatchewan team, is the age difference between the two players. I'm going to have a guess. One is, let's say, 65, and the other one might be 25, and they've teamed up to play the pairs here. They're making things work. It's very encouraging.
I don't know if there's any family relation or not, whether it's aunt or grandmother or something. I don't want to speculate on that, but. I know in the past at these events there's normally quite a bit of family ties, whether it's brother and brother or father and son or what have you. Pretty good opening 2 bowls there from both leads.
Yes, they are.
One of the things that we like to preach a little bit is just make sure your bowl's within mat length, which both of those bowls look like they could be.
Yeah, I think very easily. Except that one won't be. But
Terry shared an interesting stat with us that I think he said it was Bowls Ireland did a study, and if your team had more than 10% of its bowls short, you lost the game. I can't remember how they phrased it, but after all the research they did of all the games they studied, the team that had more than 10% of its bowls short would lose unless they were playing another team that also had more than 10% of their bowls short, in which case then it was a bit more of a toss-up. But I thought that was kind of an interesting stat that for whatever reason 10% was the number, that if you have less than 10% short, then you're more likely than not to win, which from what we've seen, at least in the first game, and what I wouldn't be surprised if I see later on here, is it's a struggle to make sure your bowls are past the jack, because you want to just draw close. You're not looking to be too far past, I guess. You're trying to be close. But one of the drills that Terry was working on with the national team candidates yesterday was to make sure they're within, I think he said, a meter behind the jack. That was one of the drills they really worked on, just because that's the efficiency zone, or the effective zone, as he called it.
Well, I don't know about all the efficiency and effective zones, but I do know that if you play a little behind the jack, you're likely to get to the jack. Whereas if you play to the jack, you're going to be short. That's what my coach tells me. My coach is my dad, but that's what he says. And so it's a 95% mind game, according to Ellen Faulkner, who's been the world's #1 female bowler. She may still well be. if she's not number one, she's number two kind of thing. And she has been in that ranking for quite some time. But when I was talking with Ellen a few years ago about bowls, I said, somebody told me that it was a 90% game. It was a lady bowler that said that. And I said, no, I didn't say. They told me. I read it. That's right, I read it. She said, no, it's 95%. She said, but tell me, who was the person that was writing this, that it's 90%? And I said, it was you, in an article. And she said, I've changed my mind. It's 95% mental. So concentration and focus and staying in the moment is very critical if you want to be in a tight head situation, assuming that you're feeling well that day and your delivery's good.
Interesting turn of events here, how this game's folded out, with Saskatchewan picking up 6 the first end. Right now, Quebec is holding 3, with still this bowl that's being played here now and one more after that as well. So I don't know if they'll be able to pick up another 6 to tie it up, but all Saskatchewan going one way and all Quebec coming back this way.
The other thing when talking about, developing the head and whether you're short or not, is that on a hot day like today, I think it's imperative that you put the water into your body. I was reading a stat about water and how fast the body loses its ability to think properly, and it's only a loss of around about 2% of water in your body that will start changing your decision making. And 2% is not enough to be highly noticeable. So I think you just got to have the discipline, once again the concentration, to get the water in. And today at 31 degrees Celsius, it could play a big part in how people approach the head, and regardless whether it's short Jake or whether it's, what.
Absolutely. I think it was my mom that used to always tell me that if you feel thirsty, then it's too late.
It's too late, yes.
Damage is already done.
Right.
Rule of thumb, I guess, is to have a small sip of water every end, or a couple large gulps every other end, or something like that. But yeah, you're right. It's interesting that not everybody has a water bottle laying around. Looking down the green here, I see quite a few, but there are some people I know who'd will only go off and get a glass of water maybe at the halfway mark, and that's about it. And it's just one of the small things that doesn't take much that you can make a difference in your game, just staying hydrated.
Yeah. You think you're bowling well and you think you've got your game together, and if you're having dehydration issues and you don't really pick up on it, you think you're not thirsty and nervous, but you are. That goes maybe an end, and that's not the end you want to lose, because you might have given up for 3 or some big number.
6-3 after 2 ends. This could be a very high-scoring game if they keep on at this pace. All multiples. I was questioning this last game too. I wonder if there's a bit of a pace differential going one way or the other, based off of what we saw last game and what's sort of shaping up here early on. It looks like it might be, I don't know if it's faster or slower one way, but I'm questioning if it's slightly off. Not quite consistent. And you'll tend to find that at a lot of clubs in Canada. There's a little bit of a slope, uphill or downhill one way or the other, and it just makes a fraction of a second difference, which might be enough to get inside people's heads.
I don't know how you compute all that when you're bowling. Somewhere along the line, your brain has the ability to perhaps do the computation, but it's certainly a reality. if there is a difference, you've got to somehow pick up on it quickly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's what those trial ends are for, to see if you can figure that out. But that means you have to really take advantage of those 3 bowls that you get.
Yep.
Are you a fan of the 3 bowl pairs option?
Yes, I am. I have no problem. I think that. Yeah, I think I could even have a conversation about 2 bowl pairs. I could have.
Yeah.
I could even have a conversation about 1 bowl. Well,
I guess that's the limit, though. Can't really go much less than that. 1 bowl is kind of.
No, we can't go any further. That's it. I think that what I'm really saying is that to make the game interesting and move along,
Mm-hmm.
not so much that you have the fewer bowls, but when you have a lot of bowls in the head, and it's rather messy at times. And I was talking to one of the bowlers today on about 4s and playing 2 bowl 4s, and what about 1 bowl 4? Now that really focuses the mind, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to consider all these possibilities. It's a different time for bowls than it was, from what I can gather, back in the day, and my parents were bowling, and the things I hear from my father now about what the game was, and it's changed dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm an advocate of constantly looking at it and seeing where the changes can be made again, because we're living in a very, very dynamic sporting world. Who would have thought that let's say indoor rock climbing would have been such a popular activity?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not quite sure if I want to go and say it's a sport, Jake, but certainly it's an activity that's fast and it's quick and it demands you be in good shape and condition, and so we're competing against lots of different sporting activities. So anything that would work towards making the game thrive,
Mm-hmm.
not just merely survive, it's got to be a conversation that I certainly would enjoy having with somebody. That train that's going in the background, it's probably going to be about 15 minutes long. Out here in the prairies of Western Canada, they seem to take 15, 20 minutes to go past a given point.
Well, with Saskatchewan being so flat, I guess it's easy for a train track to go across.
Yeah.
Once the engine's passed, it's a little bit more quieter.
That's
You
correct.
can actually hear us again. All right. We have a little bit of an off-center jack here, I think, which is proving to be a little bit challenging to get to. It's a bit of a sporadic head right now.
Mm-hmm. It is. It's a bit hard to see who's shot. We've got shadows, and we've got quite a ways down there.
I believe Quebec is holding 1 right now. Prior to this bull coming in, that just pushed it out and replaced it. So still just 1 for Quebec, I believe.
Yeah, 1 in, 1 out. That's correct. By the look of it. This is a better line than the last ball, I think. It's perhaps not. No, I think it is. Yeah. In fact, it might even take shot if it goes
Right through the port.
Yep.
That is 1 more for Quebec as they try to mount the comeback here.
Well, they've scored the last 2 ends, I think. Is that correct?
That is correct, yeah. 2 in a row.
I don't know what you can tell the people that are able to watch today, Jake, but many people, if they're coming on on stream here maybe don't understand how many bowlers there are in Quebec. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but there's a number that it's not very big, and so it's great to see these two ladies today playing and being competitive. The pool of players is very small.
I want to say it's around 300, but that could be an exaggeration. It might only be 250. I don't know that number off the top of my head either. But
either way, it's not a big pool of talent, and so the fact that they've got through their provincial championships and they're here, I think it's a compliment to them.
Absolutely, absolutely. Always happy to see some of the smaller provinces represented. We're missing PEI in New Brunswick for the fours and pairs, but we do have a PEI candidate playing in the singles, so we'll see him in 3 or 4 days' time, which is great to see.
Right.
And I think both leads prefer playing in this direction based off of how those opening bowls have been.
Well, I'm not sure if that strategy there is for Saskatchewan to put one behind, or that just got away from her. We'll see if they're, because they've got to mount a bit of a comeback here, otherwise Quebec is going to keep, they're putting them in the head, Quebec.
So we got a question from Daryl Fitzgerald on Twitter here. He's asking, what's Ian's favorite part of the game of lawn bowls?
The trophy at the end, Daryl.
Does that hold true even if you're not the name that gets put on it?
Not quite so much. Oh no, I'm pleased for whoever wins, of course. That's the way it should be. On a serious note, what's the favorite part of the game is just being able to play a good, challenging game. The games that are one-sided, where the score is for some reason or other very, very high to the opponent, or even to the team I'm playing on, not entirely satisfactory. I don't think that answers your question 100%, but maybe it gets a bit close.
That's kind of a tough question, though, to have to try to pinpoint one thing that makes you like it. For me, at least when I was younger, the reason I liked it was because I was good at it. So growing up, coming from a small town, I used to play soccer from, I don't know, age of 8 to 16 or something like that, but our small town was never any good at it, so every soccer game we'd get blown out 16-0 or 15-2 or whatever, and it just wasn't very much fun. But when I picked up lawn bowls at 8, 9 years old, whatever I was, just sort of came naturally, and so being able to beat someone else or actually hold your own against someone else was, I wouldn't say a new concept, but it made it that much more enjoyable to not be losing every game by a big blowout.
Yeah.
But that's not really a reason to like a sport either, just because you're good at it. It's not really much of an answer. I guess probably the fact that you can always improve no matter how good you are. Like, you're never going to be done. You're never just going to be, oh, I'm the best and full stop, don't need to practice anymore.
One of the things, as we're talking about the game and when you join the game, and the game is relatively easy to understand and pick up the opportunities of how to do well. But a lot of people overthink it and say, well, I can play this game in the first year. It still requires a level of patience to get through your second and third year. And they're the times that you can start to really learn the game. As the first year is maybe, some people say it's beginner's luck in certain things. Well, there's a certain level of enthusiasm that comes from the game, and yes, you might make your own luck. But the second year is a little bit more, and you start to think too much. But I think my observation is if you get through your second year, and you're starting to play well and starting to think think about the game more strategically, you got a chance of really enjoying this game, because you'll start to understand the nuances and what makes it really a very dynamic game.
Nuances is a good word because there's a lot of them in bowls. That's a really good good way to phrase that. So I think that calling for a guard here, which is an interesting tactic that you don't see very often. Anne's got her foot out front for where she wants Susan to stop.
Well, it's just about being achieved.
Yeah, not too far away.
Well, I kind of think that to me, that might be a good, if that's what the intent was, that was not a bad position.
I think Sydney just got outside.
Yes, yeah. I threw her off the angle, and she was forced to play the other hand, if she was ever thinking coming the other way. She overplayed it.
Interesting to note, though, that last game, I don't think anybody threw a bowl on that hand until about the 14th end. They all stuck to the non-ditch hand, and already this game, I think I've seen almost every player throw at least one or two on this ditch hand, going both ways. So these ladies aren't afraid to try that or play that, whereas last game, I think they were, I don't know if they were just hesitant to play it or if it actually is a poor performing hand. I can't say.
It's interesting, Quebec is sort of chipping away at the early lead that Saskatchewan put together. As you say, a perfect end. But they're not utilizing the mat, Jake. Why do you think that is? They're not really bringing it up.
I'm wondering if that's because they're feeling comfortable with where it is right now, because aside from that first end, the past three has been all Quebec, so they might actually be feeling that they're comfortable and on a roll with it where it is right now. And aside from that first end, then that scoreboard would have to indicate that, yeah, they are actually outperforming Saskatchewan at the moment anyway.
I think so, yeah. I play a league game with the Burlington Club, and in the league you get rewarded for the number of ends that you win.
Okay.
It's the calculation of who wins. So you don't, if you win lots of ends and don't have a score, but it's a close score, you can actually score as many points as the person that's got the high score, because they didn't get as many ends. And so you're getting rewarded for, if you like, consistent bowling. And that's what I think you're talking about here. Quebec has been very consistent the last few ends, and they're chipping away there. They're still down by 1 point, but I'm going to say on the ground down there, they're holding shot, aren't they?
Yeah, kind of tough to tell from where we
tell.
are. It's a little far away. It could be either way, but I think that's probably shot itself right there.
Yeah.
All of them are not exactly as close as you would like, but still many bowls left to come.
Not a pretty head, but who knows?
And that'll sail on through. So when you're playing, Ian, do you aim at something on the ditch board, or do you aim at something on the green?
I wish you hadn't asked me that.
All right, I'll take that question back.
I don't know what I do. I certainly do not aim at a ditch board mark, even though my father, after he was told that after a few years, was told to take a place on the ditch board, started winning many, many more tournaments. And so he's a big advocate of it. And so when we Skype, he's in Australia, I'm here. When we Skype, sometimes the discussion gets a little noisy because he wants me to take the ditch board and I just aim. Somehow or other, I just bowl. I would like to say I took a spot. Maybe I am a shoulder bowler and I'm not really admitting it. Maybe at the last second. I think at the last second I actually take the arc to the jack and I'm bowling to that point.
Yep.
But what I am trying to do is only bowl, say, 3 meters out in front of me, and pick my line, and then let the bowl do the work. But it's a good question for new bowlers to take. I think most people should be taking position on the bank. But one thing, when you're a new bowler, you'll get someone telling you, take this much, come out this far, go out to the boundary line. And they don't know my bowls, they don't know me, and they don't know a new bowler. So there's a bit of a tension for new bowlers, but I have seen some new bowlers just come up and just bowl. They just do it. They can't tell you what they do.
That's interesting because, as you'll know from experience, many clubs in Ontario, when you're playing on them, you can see the tracks in the green, whether it's because they're soft or wet or grass is too long or what have you, but you can actually see the marks of where all the bowls are going. And so growing up, I used to always just follow the marks. I knew exactly where my bowl was. It was somewhere in the middle, so then I would just follow the tracks. But once you get down on Australian greens or elsewhere, that disappears. They don't have those tracks on the greens from where the bowls are going, so then you have to actually make up your mind for what you're aiming at or where you're going.
Yeah. Well, I think that trying to be truthful and not sort of nonsense stuff, I probably do have an aiming line, and but I do feel I do stand off the mat before I come on the mat and try to visualize the entirety of the head in front of me, and then try to feel. You know, I was reading about Michael Jordan, and he was asked to describe certain things, and he says he didn't know. He just feels it. And I think that there's more to it than meets the eye. But Steve McCarahan, the Ontario coach, he said he feels it. Now you meet someone else, they'll say that they have an aiming line. You have an aiming line, right?
Kind of. I feel like I'm in the same boat as you, where you just sort of, like you can kind of visualize the track of where you want it to go, but you're not really aiming at somewhere on the backboard or really aiming at... Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm sort of just sort of a feeler as well, but visualization, I guess, is sort of the biggest powerful tool for that.
Yes, it is.
That was a heck of a last shot there from Sydney. Holy smokes, saving grace and picked up one to put Saskatchewan back on the board. So got a question here on Twitter from Jane saying, hey, BCB Bulls, great conversations on your streams. How do you see lawn bowls growing and evolving as a sport across Canada? And that is a loaded question that we could probably talk about for hours.
Where's Jane from?
So Jane Boyd is, I believe, Emma Boyd's mother, so out in BC.
Okay.
Emma's here competing in the fours for BC. I think she's the BC ace skip on the women's fours team. But
well, hi, Jane. Well, what's the loaded question again? Where do we see bowls going?
How do you see lawn bowls growing and evolving as a sport across Canada?
Well, it's... I suspect it's got many more opportunities than we can tackle. You know, financial resources, I think, hold the multiple opportunities back. One of the multiple opportunities might fit into if you had a bowl of things that you put in little notes and pull them out from time to time. Okay, we'll do this one now and do that one next. Is to increase the awareness amongst youth. That's a big thing. Another one might be, how do we develop the indoor game? Because the truth of the matter is, in Canada, we have 8 months cold and 4 months hot. And sometimes the hot is very hot, such as today. Many times when it's a hot day, you know yourself, Jake, people won't bowl in Australia in the middle of the summer. It's just too hot. So an indoor, we've got to spend more time on indoor. And maybe the indoor can be long mat and short mat. perhaps. So we've addressed two things. The other thing that might be is how do we develop the parabolers, people with disabilities? How do we introduce the game to new to Canada people? And the list goes on and on. And so this bowl of little notes that we'd like to do is quite a few little pieces of paper, but we've got to prioritize. There's only so much we can do, and but if we could find the financial resources that were just a little bit more than we have now, we might be able to start tackling these things. But so each province can do its own a little bit, and it's good across the country. But I'm very much interested in how do we develop more youth, because that really and truly that's the future. It doesn't matter how you say it and what you say. The other thing is that the people that are coming back to the game that had played as youth, that they're coming back at 30, 35, how do you make it attractive for them? Because they, as we said a moment ago, they've got a lot of competing sporting activities. They don't need lawn bowls, but they want to play something active. Now pickleball has just taken off. It's fast, it's fun. It's I've not played pickleball. I used to play paddle tennis when I lived in the States, and that's a similar kind of game, fast and quick and good workout. But how do you explain this to somebody who should be riding past and gets off their push bike and say, okay, let's come in and see what this game's all about? They say it was, what's happening? It's a bit slow. So how do we make it exciting and allowing people to see that this is a good game? That I like to write when I'm writing letters to some people. It's the great game. Some people say horse racing is the game of champions or something like that. But I call this the great game, and it's so strategic, and it's not a walk in the park. You just don't roll a ball down and get a result. You got to earn your way. I played a tournament the other week in the Heritage Club, and you know that quite well, Jake. And we played from 9 o'clock till 4 o'clock. That's a long day, and it takes a lot of stamina. And it was a hot day, so this is not a flaky game. You got to be in good shape. But how do you get there? Well, it's a heck of a good question. I wish we had the answers. What do you think we've got to do?
Well, that's interesting. So based on my own experience this past summer, I've been working with the club up in Ottawa, the Nepean Lawn Bowls Club, and they've got an artificial carpet. But the reason for that, we hired a summer student and wanted to pilot our Intro to Bowls program for youth as the first section of our Intro to Bowls program that we're going to use for all ages. But so they were more than willing to help us out with that, and so we put up some flyers in the Sportsplex that it's connected to, and the people we got were new Canadians, every single one of them. And I thought that was a very interesting demographic that could have a lot of potential, because people who are new to Canada are looking to form a community, looking to make friends, looking to find something to do. So that's a huge, I think, market that we could tap into. Speaking from experience, when I first moved to Ottawa 2 years ago, didn't know a soul there. So again, we turned to sports as something to do. So we joined a volleyball team, we joined a softball team. Lawn bowls could easily be that missing area that people need to fill, and to find people to communicate with, to socialize with, to do something with. So finding out where I guess you can best market, best advertise is kind of ideal. The club at Nepean is connected to a sportsplex that has hockey rinks, swimming pools, curling rinks, baseball, soccer, everything is there. So anybody who's looking for anything sports related goes there. So that was just a prime location, just happened to work out that way, which was really well. But as for where I see lawn bowls growing and evolving, not necessarily as a sport, but more as a pastime. I would say I'm going to pick on, I believe it's the Natana Lawn Bowling Club here in Saskatchewan. A friend of mine, Fran Scott, shared a good story with me a little while ago and sent me a whole bunch of documentation that I'm sifting through of how 5 years ago her and a couple of her friends went down to the club and rolled some bowls, and so that was her exposing her friends to lawn bowls for the first time, and had a couple beers and said, hey, this is a lot of fun, we should bring our other friends too. So eventually they had, I think, 10 to 15 of them, and formed a small little few teams, had a couple of games, and said, hey, this is great. And through word of mouth, the next year it turned into 30, the next year it turned into 60, and they ended up having a Wednesday night beer league where now it is, I want to say, 36 teams of triples. And this year, registration opened May 1st, and they were sold out May 2nd. 24 hours, they were sold out. All the rinks are used, triples, a lot of people who have never tried lawn bowling before. And it's all through word of mouth, just people are having a hoot with it. And a big part of their success is that they make it fun for younger people. So everybody there is between the ages of, I think, 20 and 40 is sort of that almost age demographic, age market. And so they have music blaring, they've got a barbecue going every night, they've got the bar open for that crowd. So I want to say it's like a 8-week league, and registration fee for the team is like $250 or something like that, and they come down for Wednesday nights, 8 Wednesdays in a row, and they're happy. And that's just sort of blown up in Saskatoon, which I could easily see that being mimicked by a lot of other clubs. But that doesn't necessarily answer how the sport's growing and evolving, because that's not really growing us as a sport. That's growing us more of a pastime, as a social avenue. But as a sport, I'd sort of relate to what Anna's speech was last night at the banquet, of how Commonwealth Games gave us such a big boost in the eye of Canada and with Sport Canada, and opened a few more doors for funding and a few more listeners, a little bit more positive feedback. I could get into a political realm of how we need to have more coaches across Canada to really be taken seriously, how we need to have a few more clubs, and you hit the head on the nail with needing more indoor clubs so we can actually stay bowling year round instead of just 4 months a year. But that's a long-winded, tricky question for how we see it growing and evolving, because it could easily grow and evolve into numerous different avenues, different paths. But the fact is that it is growing and evolving, which I think is super exciting. Touching on a few provinces individually, Alberta has shown considerable growth over the past 5 years. Nova Scotia has shown considerable growth over the past 5 years. So looking at numbers of certain provinces where they were 5 years ago to where they are now, and seeing them go up is encouraging to know that, hey, word is getting out and people are actually trying this, liking it, staying with it.
I think you make great points. You want to just give the sort of look at what's going on down in the game situation here now. We've got both teams tied up here, so this is turning in to be a good match. Neither team is letting the other one get away from it. They're matching bowl for bowl on this end. If you put one there, I'll put another one next to you, but I want to be inside closer to the jack. I don't know if you can see it on the screen because the shadows down there are quite dark.
So I love how both Jane and Daryl are active on Twitter here, so I'm going to have to sort of pick and choose one at a time who I can answer first. But Jane saying, love these responses, agrees so much with what's being said. There's so many more opportunities and possibilities, but also love the idea of hiring a summer student. Need to do so much more of that across the country, and then have them help to really raise awareness of local clubs. That's actually an idea that I pitched at the Elmdale Lawn Bowling Club, is another club in Ottawa that I've been working with, to sort of bounce some ideas off of them to see what their take is and how feasible it is for clubs to run with some of the ideas I've had. One of the things that I'm hopefully working on over the next year is developing planning templates, because every club I've been to, none of them have a big picture plan of where they'd like to be 5 years from now. And I think having that written down on paper and having a plan is sort of step number one to actually growing your club and surviving. So when working with them on that, which is what I'm hoping to do over the winter, I suggested to them last week when I met with them hiring a summer student. And I think that that's a huge opportunity that a lot of clubs could dig into, because there is the summer student grant program or whatever it is that's offered all across Canada, where they'll match, I think, up to 80% of funds for hiring a summer student or something along those lines. I'd have to look into more research for that for sure. But if clubs could hire a summer student for the summer, they could look into having that student promote them online, give them a real online presence, whether it's their website, social media, what have you. Even if you taught them how to mow the greens, not necessarily fertilize or verticut or anything else, but just simply mowing, that would ease the burden on your greenskeeper. You could have them there so that your club is actually open more often than not, because that's a struggle with a lot of clubs too, is that they're only open from 7 till 9 p.m. on Monday night, and that's it. So how is anybody else supposed to come to your club if you're never open? So I think there's a lot of opportunities for summer students if we could get clubs to actually apply for the grant to do it and pony up the last 20% of funds or whatever it is needed to hire a summer student. But that's an opportunity for another day, possibly.
You need to perhaps get a book and write all this down. Keep track. You put that as number 121.
Yeah, exactly. There's a million different options. But I'll get on to Daryl's question here now. He's saying, what's Ian's opinion on indoor bowls as a way to increase the season and expand the game?
To increase the what, please?
To increase the season and expand the game.
Thanks for the opportunity, Daryl. It's the indoor bowling can be short mat or long mat. Either one is good. There are some people that prefer indoor long mat because that's the game that they play in the summer. And but you've got to, if you find a club that has indoor, and let's say it's mostly full length, it's probably a soccer field, and there are many different surfaces in the soccer field. I played an indoor a few years ago, and the turf on the artificial was at least a quarter, if not more, inches in length, and it had regrind of rubber, and I felt that at the time I was trying to understand how to go forward, that this might hurt my game, because I've just got to deliver it differently. I've got to think differently. It comes in at the jack differently. So I wasn't entirely happy, and then I found a club that had a much faster surface, and I found when I went to it, there were a lot of good bowlers there that they thought that it was a good place to go. So I did my best to drive 75 kilometers in the winter, sometimes during the heavy snow, or if I didn't get the heavy snow going, I got it coming home. But I persevered, and I came to understand that if we could have an indoor bowling facility in Canada, or let's say in Ontario for sure, where most of the bowlers are, that would be a good thing. Then I got involved in the short mat, almost, if you like, just by accident, and came to understand that the short mat is a very, very viable way of developing the game. You can take it to schools. You can roll up the mat. It doesn't cost much to enter the sport. You can have 5 mats and some jacks and the center block, and you wouldn't be spending $20,000. Now, where would you put the 5 mats? Maybe you could go to a community hall or Legion Hall or church hall, or maybe your club is big enough to do that, and maybe it's winterized and all that stuff. But it's a very affordable way to enter, and you can use your outdoor bowls. You don't have to go and get special bowls to play it. If you take Ireland, when I played a short mat in England a few years ago, the Irish skip and I talked a bit. He was a very affable gentleman, and we chatted after the game, and he said they had something like 30,000 bowlers in Ireland playing indoor short mat, and they've only got a population of 5 million. So let's pretend that it was 6 times smaller, or Canada's 6 times bigger, so probably closer, truth be closer to 7 times. That would mean that they would have a couple of 100,000 bowlers. So you can see, wow, if you could somehow or other get hold of this kind of these numbers, that the game would change. And therefore, those 200,000 that are playing indoor, let's say, they're going to want to play outdoor, some of them. Maybe only 50,000 of them. Well, we only have 15,000 bowlers in Canada. So there'd be a demand for more clubs. So the dynamics of indoor bowling, I think, if properly understood, we could use that as a lever to increase the outdoor bowling. And that's exactly what they do in Ireland. They take it to the schools and they use it as a way of seeding the outdoor clubs. Now in Ireland it's also a lot of inclement weather with regards to a lot of rain. So I'd have to get to understand how many clubs they have for the outdoor bowling.
Right.
It may be skewed disproportionately smaller for their country, but I think that we've got to look at indoor bowling differently for this country. It may not be true of Australia, although they do have indoor bowling in Australia, and it's quite successful. In fact, they have a Australian versus New Zealand championship for indoor bowling, and it's been going on like that for quite some time. But if we want to grow the sport, that's a great avenue to explore more seriously. But once again, it comes back to funding. Clubs could easily winterize their building. They could put a few mats in, they could provide it, or they could find a church hall or community. Muskoka Club has gone to their local community hall, and they've just bought a number of short mats. So that's a very progressive club. It's only about 2 years old, one of the newest clubs perhaps in Canada. They've got I think it must be around now 100 members in that vicinity, and people go there for the summer and they like to do recreational bowling and sort of not have an obligation to do too much. So they've hooked up with a golf club. Now there's another opportunity. Pinehurst, the famous Pinehurst Golf Club in America, where the US Open is being played and from time to time, they have a bowling green. We talked about the waiting list a moment ago. Minneapolis, there's a pub that has a bowling green with a 10-year waiting list. They say. I don't know if that's true, but that's what it said on the site. But they don't. They don't have any ditches. So they're playing different. Something's going on differently. So how do I see indoor bowling? I see it's a great opportunity to develop this game. One of the best opportunities we have. And we've got to tackle it differently. The Short Mat Association is, slowly developing, but maybe they've got to shake hands with Bowls Canada. But Bowls Canada comes under the auspices of World Bowls, and World Bowls doesn't really talk to the short mat people. So there's a few political things to be sorted out. But my take on it, Daryl, is that it would be great if we could, if your club could put in 3 mats. And it's going to cost you under $10,000. I'm not selling these mats, by the way.
Yeah, no, you'll have to source them yourself, but that's what you got to do.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you talked about Ireland, though, because that immediately made me think of when I was in Australia. My roommate was from Ireland, and he was telling me stories of how in their indoor championships, the carpet they were playing on was 24 seconds, so you barely put it down, and it just goes on and on and on forever. And so you can walk down to the other end and stand there, and it's watch it forever and a day to come down. And so I think he said he had to play 6 games a day on this 24-second carpet, which just took hours and hours and hours. But I think he ended up being the winner, and he immediately moved to Australia actually after we finished that youth that I was at. And so he was actually in the Australian Indoor Championship this past week. I'm not sure how far he got, but his name was Shane Leonard. But,
okay.
Yeah, it just made me think of all the stories you told me about Ireland and how different it is over there. I'm just thinking about how if you were to play on a 24-second carpet indoor in the winter and then try to switch to a 11-second grass surface outside in the summer would be a heck of a difference. But I guess that's what he does because he still likes the outdoor game. I wouldn't say a heck of a lot more, but he enjoys it for what it is. So he'll do that switch back and forth, which I can only imagine is playing games with your head, having to switch from 24 seconds to 11 seconds and then back to 24 seconds is something else. But
it's doable. It's there is adjustment, of course, but you hopefully you don't have to adjust playing a tournament. You're going to try and adjust in a practice round or something. Get a mate out there, and because there is an adjustment. I remember going down to play the Australian Open, and I put came out of 8-second green in my club that I was playing at the time, and played on the Australian green. And I think my bowl is my jack, I should say, is still running. That's 3 years ago.
Still going.
Yeah, still going. Beats the Ever Ready battery. Oh, someone brought this. I don't know.
Yeah, we got some water here for us. So, haven't been checking Facebook. Sorry, Roger. I see that now. Roger Smith from Quebec is also watching this game, which makes sense as we've got Quebec on air here. And he said, notice the size of the heads bowling into the shadows versus out of the shadows, which is a very, very valid point. They are playing into shadows under the trees down there. And when he sent that message, it probably would have been a bigger difference than it is right now. But yeah, that's definitely something you need to think about when you're playing into the shadows. How good are your eyes? How good is your depth of perception? Roger Smith is a longtime friend of mine, actually. Don't know if I've told too many people this story, but when I first went to university, I went to the University of Guelph back in 2011, and I was in computer science, and I was there for 2 years, and wasn't really enjoying it, I guess is the best way I can phrase that. I was still getting decent marks, high 70s, but sort of banging my head against a wall with all the coding that I had to do. And so a lot of late nights I would be up talking to Roger on Facebook Messenger, and he sort of was a good listening ear, I guess. I don't want to say he coaxed me into switching programs, but he was offering very good advice, very good suggestions on, what should I do with my life going forward. And so after a lot of late night chats with him, I decided to up and move to Brock University down in St. Catharines to take sport management rather than computer science, even though I don't want to say wasted 2 years at Guelph, but I'd been there for 2 years in computer science, different programs. So, going back to Roger's comment there, glad to have you watching. Super appreciate the advice you gave me back in the day. That would have been a good 5-6 years ago.
It makes, I think Roger's point is quite interesting, that another one of the things that you have to take into account when you're playing this game, and comes from experience. I found out 4 years ago, after playing bowls for a while, that I only had one eye, and so depth of field perception wasn't there. But maybe, who cares? It was only my first year, and bowling with a size 5 Dunlop.
Ooh.
Not many people have heard of Dunlop.
No.
They were actually taken over by Henselite at one point, and they're very close to a Henselite Classic. And so the depth of field, even in the sun, was, I'm told now, is that it wasn't 100%. So Roger's point about coming into the shadows, you've got light and you've got shadows. You better focus your mind very, very carefully. I think to his point is that I would, if it were me playing right now, I would say that I'm going to take a little extra time coming onto the mat. This what's this young lady?
Sydney Boyd.
Sydney.
Yes.
She came up, basically walked onto the mat and rolled the ball. Let's see what she does here, because it may get rid of. Oh, she's short by quite a ways, but not so bad. A good line. But if it were me going into there, I'd be taking a little extra time, making sure I looked and checked and rechecked, because it is difficult. You've got light and you've got dark and you've got bowls around and your perception. There's a lot going on in your mind. So I'll bet you no bowler, new bowler into the game would never be talked about. This would never come up in conversation. May not even come up in a coaching, but it might come up in the high development program that we've got coming up in a few weeks. You're aware of that one, remember?
Yes.
September 9th or something. And
something like that, yeah.
And that might come up there. That'd be a good question, actually, to have somebody like Dave Anderson, if he's putting on the clinic, or David Llewellyn, some of these people that might be working on that clinic. I think it's one of the more interesting questions I've had come across my mind a little while. Now this young Cindy has put down another ball, and she did the same setup, which is very fast. For me, it's very fast. And she's offline again. She could be in the count because it's hard to see just exactly what's going on down there from here. We'll see if the measure goes to her in a second. Not so far.
So I've got a tweet from, I'm going to butcher that first name, so I'm not even going to try. I'm just going to say Miss Gallo, saying, by the way, Shane Leonard lost to Aaron Tees, but great commentary and great bowls, following from Berkeley, California. Love the sport and come and visit with us at the Berkeley Lawn Bowling Club. Yeah. That makes me wonder if she knows Mike McNorton, the Ontario, now Californian. He used to bowl out of the Heritage Club, and he's, say, 27, 28, somewhere around there. Just moved to California last year, so he's been touring all of the California Lawn Bowls clubs. But great to know we've got someone watching all the way down from Berkeley.
Thank you for that. I did a bit of research, apart from the fact that Walt Disney was an avid bowler and actually bowled at the Burlington Club back in the day. Was a very avid bowler in California. I'm not quite sure of the club that he bowled at. But there was another gentleman from, I think he was from perhaps Minneapolis. He built a very successful business, and escapes me just quickly as to what the business was all about. But he fell in love with the game so much that I believe he built somewhere in the vicinity of 9 bowling clubs in California.
Wow.
He financed them personally. We're trying to see if we can bring him back. Resurrections are a bit hard, but if there's some chance to get somebody like that again, maybe we should introduce the game to Warren Buffett or Bill Gates or somebody.
Well, you know, I used to use this as sort of a opportunity to throw some random Bulls trivia out there. I didn't have time to do any researching prior to coming here, but I remember last year one of the questions I asked was something to do with U.S. Pairs tournament down in California. It had the biggest trophy in all of the U.S. Weight-wise. It was, I want to say, like a 75-pound trophy or something like that.
That's
and who was the gentleman who flew to talk to the president in the morning, but declined lunch to come back to watch the afternoon Bulls match?
Oh, that's a good piece of trivia. Who was it?
It was Walt Disney.
It was Walt Disney.
Walt had his own little green that I guess the Disney company still sponsors today. I don't think they throw in too much money, but I could be wrong. I don't know that. But somewhere down, I want to say that it's in California, but I could be wrong on that too.
More than likely. He moved to Burbank, I think, somewhere, whether his studios were somewhere nearby. Beverly Hills. Or
yeah, Beverly Hills is that's ringing a bell. But yeah, I thought that was really interesting that went and talked to the president in the morning, but declined lunch because I got to get back to watch the afternoon Bulls match.
Okay. That's a good story. Well, if you get the chance, Jake, I certainly will revisit when I get the chance to find out what that club is in Minneapolis that's got the 10-year waiting list. And they have leagues like you talked about. A bit more like 5-pin or 10-pin. You can actually go and have a pickup game at or not pickup games. You go and book a time. Okay, I want to play right now. And you go down and there's a lane available. You can bring your family and friends down and play. Or you can have your own league and work with the club. You want 4 lanes or something. You want them down here or in the middle or at the other end or whatever. they're kind of interesting situations that possibly this game could learn from. Then again, some people might say, well, that's their game. This is our game. If you want to play outdoor bowls, this is the game. It's not bocce. It's not petang. It's not some other, crown bowls. This is lawn bowls. And it ain't going to change. These are the rules for this game. Hard to have a sort of an argument because there's a lot of sense in what they say.
Mm-hmm.
So have you played petang, Jake?
I have not. I've played bocce, actually. A guy that I play softball with through a bocce tournament that he does every year. So this was the first year that me and my girlfriend went to it. And he had, I think, 24 teams.
Okay.
And he just makes 4 random fields on his lawn and throws up some obstacles and uses his 4 bocce sets and whatnot. So you have a double knockout tournament. We got fortunate and showed up late, so got to the bottom half, and I think we had like 3 buys throughout the day, so we almost walked into the final, which was ideal. But people there didn't know that I was a lawn bowler, so as soon as they found out, they were all a little disgruntled, saying, "Oh, sure, bring in the ringer," playing the final. But so that's my most recent experience with bocce, was at a very unofficial, on a front yard tournament. But no, I've never played petang.
Petang is. I had the good fortune to play a game by walking past an area and a community down in Florida. I was just walking past with family and friends, and I saw it, and I wondered what it was, and I inquired, and they said, "Would you like to try?" Much the same as my father was playing, how he started lawn bowls. He was sort of watching, "Why don't you try?" After a bit of persuasion, he did try and did play. Well, I played this petang, and I found it fascinating that you take the little ball under and throw it up.
Mm-hmm.
So it's sort of not like rolling. You throw it up and it goes down, and you hit this little marble and it moves around. So the fact that I had some hand-eye coordination, the people said, you can finish the game with us if you want. And I thought, oh, that's good. I started to enjoy it, and at the end of it, they said, "Would you like to play in the tournament tomorrow?" I said, "Wait a minute here." I'm just walking past. And they said, "No, we really, the club champion, her partner is taken sick and she's looking for somebody." And said, "Would you be the person?" I said, "Well, I can't. I'm just visiting around here." But there's a beautiful bowl from Cindy just coming in. Just didn't quite do the job, but well bowled. So there's these other games that people have, crown bowls and petang, and I guess they're competitors. They're not really competitors. They're not as organized as bowls, though.
Mm-hmm.
And here's another. So this head is in front of us. Is
really building up here.
It's very, very nice head, yes. There's, by the look at it, only 2 more bowls to come, but...
So Ms. Gallows told us that the club with the long waiting list is britspub.com/lawnbowling. Inviting us to come play in the U.S. Open in Arizona or in the Bay Area. Some funny hashtags, though. Hashtag bowls is life. Hashtag bocce is overrated.
So what was the name of the
the britspub.com.
The Brits Club, that's it. That
Brits
rings
Pub.
a bell. That's
Yeah.
it. That's it. Yeah. Well, I think the interesting thing is there are a lot of bowlers in America that we don't know about.
Mhm.
I'm not sure about this 10-year waiting list thing, of course.
Well, it just sort of makes me think of some stories I heard when I was in class and taking sport management classes. I guess the Boston Celtics back in their heyday, back in the 70s, 80s, when they were top notch for season's tickets, they had a wait list of, it was actually over 10 years because they were that good that people would automatically renew and so people were on the wait list for 10 years to get their season's tickets. But the people who were running the Celtics at the time didn't bother to call the people on the wait list or try to encourage them any other way, just sort of left them out to dry. So once the Celtics actually started tanking in the 90s and 2000s, they started phoning these people up saying, hey, the wait list is finally open. And these people were now sort of ticked off because they waited over 10, 15, 20 years and never heard a word from the organization until now when they're kind of a garbage team. So that's a 10-year wait list that I wouldn't want to be a part of.
Well, we're talking. You talked about the 10-year waiting list, and we talked about the evolution of the game. I read somewhere recently that cricket is the fastest-growing sport in Canada. New to Canada, a lot of people are coming from cricket-playing countries, and they're forming a league. And in fact, I think they've formed already a super league that's playing other teams around the world, coming out of Canada. They came with big numbers and big enthusiasm, good quality of players, and somewhere along the line they're getting financed. Sometimes I think that we ought to just say we've got two bowlers in Canada. We've got the local tennis club or the local bowls club, whatever you want to call it, and then we've got the super clubs. Maybe we only need 5 super clubs, and fierce competition. If you haven't won a provincial, you're probably at the bottom of the ladder. It takes a while to get to the top of the ladder in this club. Here we're getting a visit from the Bowls
Canada
President David. You come for a rest or you sojourn, and you want to take over? Yeah. Your team here in front of you is, I think, just gotten pipped at the post. Maybe they started off 6-0 first end, and now they're 11 down 11-9, I think. But the quality of play is very high between the two of them. Neither is giving an inch.
So fingers crossed you can still hear us, but our iPad that we're using to stream here is just overheated and it's telling me it needs to cool down before I can use it again. So I was told that this will actually still be streaming without the iPad. It's just I'm not going to be able to change camera views. So whatever camera view you're on right now is what you're going to be stuck with until the iPad cools down. I believe you should still be able to get audio too. So let us know on Twitter or Facebook if you can still hear us or if the feed cut out or anything like that. Fingers crossed this iPad cools down quickly so we can get back to being able to change the camera. Take off the case.
It's got lots of heat, so
yeah.
That won't be affecting it.
Yeah, it's a hot day here, and
yeah.
Like in the toast rack.
So what camera angles do we have here, Jake?
So we've got 2 cameras. This one here is just pointing at the players delivering, and the one down there is pointing at the other head too. So I'm hoping that I have it at the head end and not at the people delivering, because if you're just watching them deliver, you're not seeing where their bowls end up.
At the next rink over, we have, I think we said it was Novus. No, it's not. It's Alberta playing.
Yeah, it's Alberta B and Ontario B, and right now Alberta's up 15-3 after 10.
Yeah, so this is a challenge for Ontario down there.
The rink beside that is Saskatchewan A and Manitoba, and it looks like Manitoba's up 6-5 after 8 over Saskatchewan. Further on down, men's pairs, Ontario's up 14-3 over BC. That's Ontario A, and I'm not sure if that's BC A, I think. Can't quite see. 10-6 for the other Ontario, another BC men's pairs match. BC's up 10-6 over Ontario. I think that's the BCB over Ontario B on the furthest rink down there, second furthest rink down.
Yes, that's the Ontario B.
All the way down at the end is women's pairs, and it's 9-7. I think that's 9-7 for BC over Ontario.
That looks to be correct. Bit hard to see way down there. The sun's quite glary here.
It's a long ways away.
And it's It is a fair way to look. They were trying to do some bowler profiles and writing down on a piece of paper some information. Did you get to fill in one, Jake?
For bowler info?
Yeah.
No, I did not. They gave me a big binder, and I'm not sure where I put it, but I do have a massive binder full of feedback of player stats, which I'll have to dig out once I have some more time.
One of the more interesting one is Mike Spadafora from Ontario. He wrote down that he had played 14 provincial tournaments, whether they're trips, singles, or whatever, and he's won silver, gold, or bronze. He's played on 14 different teams. And so joking around the table was, well, nobody wanted you or everybody wanted you. But it is interesting that he's been fortunate enough to play on 14 different teams and win at different, whether it's a gold, silver, or bronze. So that kind of feedback would be interesting if you ever had the time, late night reading, to compile it all. And I'm not quite sure what it means for the future and evolution of bowls, but I'm sure there's some good stories, in other words. So what would your story be, Jake, if you had to write down the most memorable bowling event that you, or incident, or whatever?
Ooh, incident.
Well, that's a little bit more
that's
suggestive of what happened.
I remember playing in WOBA back when it was at Fairmont in London, back probably a good 8 years ago. And I was playing with my dad, and we were playing against Cody, and I can't remember who his partner was, but I was playing lead, and I shanked a ball off my leg. So as I was coming forward, my arm hit my leg somehow, and it ended up coming maybe halfway down the green, and was almost on the out-of-bounds marker, middle of nowhere. And the very last bowl, Cody throws a drive, and we get a rebounding jack that came halfway up the green and almost nestled right next to my bowl, which I thought was one of the funniest things I've ever seen, because it was the worst bowl I've probably ever thrown, that barely got halfway down the green and almost out of bounds, and ended up beating the shot at the end of the game.
Well, my brother is a golf pro in Australia. He has an expression for that kind of thing. When you have a great drive, or he teaches putting, so mostly it's about putting. Take the surprise look off your face as fast as you can.
Yep.
And did you do that?
Yeah, I pretended to say as if it's what I was intending, yeah.
That's right. We all know you fibbed, but that's okay.
So I got another question here from Roger Smith, saying in an 18 game of pairs, or 18-end game of pairs or fours, what's the magic number that guarantees victory 95 times out of 100? And is there a difference between an 18-end game and a 16-end game?
There you go, Jake. What a question for you.
Yeah, what a question. What's the magic number? Well, I'm going to go with 45 is a pretty good guarantee of, if you can score 45 points, I think you're laughing. But I'm not sure what that would be, just because based off of all the scores that I've seen, I'd say 20 to 25 in that ballpark is usually maybe 95% of the time might be good enough for an event like this. But it really does come down to competition, who you're playing, because I have seen high scoring affairs that are 27, 25 at the end of a game, and you might think you're okay at 25 points and end up losing by 2, but I'm not sure what the magic number would be for that. That's a good question.
Seems to me that there's the magic number is more one of theory, the practical number. If you scored 27 in a game, it's going to be hard to beat. It's beatable, but that's a high number. If you got 30, you're going to win. What's the low number that?
The lowest number you can get and still win?
Yeah, that's it's one and end.
Yeah, one and end, I guess.
Plus one.
I'm thinking that the optimal number for that might be what a lot of Ontario tournaments do for an overplus, is they give you an end and a half. So if you play a 10-end game, then the max you can get is 15, and anything over that is a plus.
Right.
So I feel like that might be sort of a magic number if you get an end and a half worth of points. So in an 18-end game, that would be, 27 points, I guess?
Yeah.
27 might actually be the magic number for an 18-end game, and then for a 16-end game, it would be 24, if that math follows.
Well, here's a game that on the second rink over, the Ontario team picked up 1. So it's a long fight back if you're going to go, you're down 15-4. So we'll keep a little bit of an eye on what's going on there for you.
So I think that we might have a bit of a break in the game in front of us here. I'm not sure if it's heat stroke or just exhaustion or something like that, but we're taking a short break here while the players sit down to catch their breath, and as we mentioned, it is 31 degrees out, so it's toasty.
Yeah, and one of the players is sitting down, and earlier she was having a wet towel, so it might be wise that she stops for a moment.
So it's been, an hour and a half almost into this game, I think. So, I mean, technically they still have another hour to finish these last...
well, there's time off on the clock for the heat, is it? Or does it count?
I actually have no idea. I'd have to go look into the conditions of play to see what... It
would seem fair that it's taken off the clock, because we do have rules on condition of play about heat, right? And
yeah. There's heat warnings and whatnot. Also, sort of new this year, I guess, is lightning. What to do with thunder and lightning? Because Environment Canada came out with some new recommendations. If you can hear it, clear it.
Yep.
And that's been sort of a cause for concern, I guess, with these prairies provinces, because you can almost always see a thunderstorm off in the distance between Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta, being so flat that you can see miles and miles away. So that's something we're going to have to sort of figure out the best way to deal with that, because if it's 100 miles away, it's not anywhere near, but you can still possibly see lightning. So not quite sure how to tackle that one. Obviously, player safety is first and foremost. So Roger's asking, did any player lose a match this morning after scoring 20? I would have to go to look at our results standings page, because I honestly have no idea.
Did they lose a match scoring 20?
I don't think so, because there weren't that many that scored 20 in the first place.
I think
22-16 was a high-scoring game, but 23-10, 26-11, no, they didn't. So 20 could be the magic number then, for at least this round.
Well, yes, I think you're right. It's a big number to get.
Yes.
And lose.
Yeah, it is a big number to lose too. That's true.
Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah.
In Victoria last year, the very first game that we streamed was, I want to say men's triples, and I remember Nova Scotia was part of it, and I think they were playing BC. And I want to say it was like the second or third end, one of the teams picked up a 7, and I said, "Oh, I bet that's the highest scoring end we're going to see all week. There's no way we're going to see another 7-ender." And sure enough, later on in the game, the opposite team picked up an 8 to make it close again. And as the game progressed, it was an 8-point differential, and on the very last end, Nova Scotia picked up a 9, a perfect end to win the game. And so I just sort of had to chuckle to think, yeah, sure. I say that's probably the highest end that you're going to get is 7, and you go and get an 8 and a 9 in that same game later on.
Yeah.
But it was a very entertaining a first game, very high-scoring affair. But even that game, I want to say, only got up to 23, 24 points for both teams, somewhere in that ballpark. So not as high as you would expect when you hear of a 7, an 8, and a 9 in a game.
Yeah, I think it's one thing humbly about the game of bowls is that don't count your chickens.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I guess another highlight, memorable bowls moment for me, if I were to be telling stories, is probably about 10 years ago. Dad and I played down at the Windsor Lawn Bowling Club. And that was the first time I've ever been there, and we struggled on their upper deck, which is the only place they were having games for the tournament. They have 2 greens, and they were only using the upper one.
Yep.
And so we got on some greens that we just couldn't find the lines on. So we were getting some unfortunate results, not being able to figure things out, so we went 0-2 to start the tournament. And so the third game, they put us down on the lower deck, and it was the most beautiful green I'd played on all year, a perfect draw both hands. So the very first end, we took a 6.
Mm-hmm.
Next end, we took an 8. The third end, we took a 7. And the fourth end, we took a 6. And so with those tournaments, that you max out at whatever an end and a half is, so we'd maxed out after 3 or 4 ends and still had another, I think, 10 ends to go because there were 14 end games. And so we both sort of looked at each other saying, well, what do we do now? We've already maxed out, and it's only been 4 ends. And then you feel bad beating up on the other team too, because you're here to have fun. You're not here to mop the floor with someone either. So didn't really know what to do at that point. So we just sort of kept chucking, but weren't really focused anymore, because you're not trying to crush someone. You're just there to roll some bowls and have some fun. It wasn't a national championship or anything. It was just a random tournament.
Yeah, that was not. Well, talking about the funny ends, I happened to play a wonderful game with a guy called David Ball from Burlington.
Ah, yes, Dave Ball.
And David is one of the better fours bowlers, along with his team, Mo Ali, and I can't remember the other gentleman. I don't want to say their name incorrectly, but because I can't remember 100%. But I had only been bowling, I think it was my second year, and so I come and meet Dave in the VSM, the OBA thing that Burlington puts on, and first end singles. First end I got 4, second end he got 4, next end I got 4, next end he got 4, next end I got 2, next end he got 2, next end I got 2, and next end he got 2, next end I got 1, he got 1. Anyhow, by the time we're coming to the last end, I'm sitting 3, and he's 1 behind, the way the math worked out. And so he was about to pack up and go home, and he put his last bowl down, just moved the jack, just clipped the jack. He got 2, therefore he was 1 ahead of me, because he was one behind. Then he got the even, then the 1 made it for the 2. And David's not doing well right now, and I tried to tell him about the game, and he doesn't remember. But I remember it very, very clearly. We played a couple of tournaments after that together. But how can you do that? How can you go match each other?
Back and forth.
Not 4-3 or 4-2. It's 4-4, 2-2. It's So my point is when you get that 8 and 7 and 8,
Mhm.
where do they come? This is a very humbling game. You don't just know what's going to happen.
Mhm.
You, you're required to stay in the moment all the time. And Ellen Faulkner, I think, was right. 95% mental.
Mhm. Mhm.
But it begs the question. I remember reading an article by a gentleman, Ralph Ellis, who
Mhm.
from Ontario. He talked about visualization, and I have a high regard for the concept. Can you actually play this game in your mind so that you don't have to actually go out and spend the time out? You can say, okay, I haven't got time to go down to the local green, but I'll play a game in my mind. Pianists do it. They actually go and play
Mhm.
Mozart's, whatever, Chopin's or whatever it is, symphony in their mind. And they can play it with their fingers and play the notes and they can hear it all. Can we do that in bowls? Have you ever tried to do something like that? Play a game in your mind?
I don't know if I've ever tried to play a full game, but I've definitely visualized certain aspects of it. I guess I've visualized making very specific shots the day before a tournament. So whether it's drives, trails, draws, what have you, I've visualized very specific shots. But I don't know if I've ever actually tried to do an entire game. I feel like that could be a very long process. A lot of concentration needed for that.
Well, I think you're right. I think, but even if you did 6 ends or 5
Mhm.
ends or something like that,
Mhm.
would you agree that visualization has a large
Yeah,
part of it?
absolutely. I would agree with that 100%. My old basketball coach used to profess that as well. Before a big tournament or a big game, he'd bring the whole team in and have us just lay on the gym floor and close your eyes while he played some soft music and asked us to visualize this, that, or the other. So regardless of the sport, I think visualization is a very powerful tool.
Well, this game is restarted, Jake. I don't know what's
Yes,
going on
we
here.
are
They finished
back
the
in.
end. Looks like there might be a measure going on.
Wedging the jack in, which heard some new terminology for wedges from Terry earlier. He said that they called it huggers in Manitoba, and down in New Zealand they call it chalkies or chalkers or something like that.
Yeah, that I've heard.
Haven't heard them called huggers, but I mean, I guess that is a fitting term. So one Saskatchewan to tie things up.
11, 11, 11. 11 to each after 11 ends.
Well, after 12 actually, but
Is it 12?
yeah, they're a little off on updating that.
Okay. Yeah, here it goes. Yes, Jake's right.
Don't hear that too often.
Well, if I think of it, I'll send you one, an email every day. Every Monday, Jake's right. Actually, it's an interesting point. We have scoreboards here for spectators.
Mhm.
Sadly, we don't have as many spectators as we would like. Maybe on the weekend we'll pick that number
Mhm.
up. Today is being Thursday.
Mhm.
But some people are not informing the few people that are looking as frequently as they ought to.
Mhm.
I think it's something, if you got the scoreboard, you should use it.
Well, you know, that's
It's
actually
a courtesy.
an interesting point, though, because I don't know about you, but every tournament I've ever played at, most of them never have the scoreboards out, so you're never really in the habit of even thinking about it. I know when I'm out there playing, I'm not thinking about the scoreboard at all. I'm thinking about what shot I'm playing or how the game's going or something else game-related. I'm not even fixing the scoreboard's not even a thought in my brain at that point, just because I'm not used to it. There's not very many tournaments I play in where it even exists, where it's even used.
Well, I think for a large number of people, that's the way it is. My bowling partner on Thursday night in Burlington, Kenny, I asked him one time, what's the score? He said, well, you don't need to know. I'll tell you when you need to know. Well, because my philosophy is that I think that you should be aware of where you're standing. It might affect your decision making. it's just a information gathering tool. It's you shouldn't be intimidated by the score, especially if you're down and you're down by a sizable number. Because every time you look at it, and if you see you're down 7 and there's only 3 ends to go, it may be a negative to your brain. On the other hand, if you're down, say, pretend you're down 4 and 3 ends to go, it might say, well, I'm lying 2 on the ground now, and if I can just somehow or other squeak in for another 1, tighten the game up. That might affect your delivery. It might make you tense. It might make you relaxed or concentrate. I guess one could find an argument for anything, but I like to look at the scorecard after each end and make sure. And I don't find it to be a detriment to look at the score. I don't think so. But, I haven't kept my stats of when I win and lose by looking at the scorecard. I ain't got time for that one. But I think that what it does by looking at the scorecard, even if I'm playing lead, and in this case on Thursday, Kenny's keeping score as skip, I'll keep it. Because I didn't like his answer, and I keep it so I kind of know where I'm at and what I'm doing, and I think it keeps you in the game. It's a bit like if you want to be into this game, I think part of it is that you've got to live it. And that means you should be watching YouTube bowls from around the world, perhaps. You should be buying a book on bowls, whether it's about the mechanics of the game or. If you take Kelvin Kurkow's Roll Gold, it's a bit of a autobiography, but it's quite humorous. But he delivers bowls in a refreshing way, and he humanizes it. So I think if you're not a student of the game, you're not a player. Now, Darryl. He does his column.
Yeah, he's got his own little blog going. Yeah.
And I can't read it every time it comes out, but I read as much as I can. It clearly shows that he's interested, and I think it comes out in the game.
Yeah.
If you're it reminds me of the Wayne Gretzky quote. Wayne was saying that in this little quote, I don't think it's so much the talent that God gave me. I think it might be more the passion, and I think that's the key thing. How much passion do you have for something?
For sure, need to be passionate with bowls down in Southern Hemisphere countries. That's something that's always sort of baffled my mind, how in Australia they can play year-round and not be burned out. Because I find that no matter what it is, if you're doing it year-round, eventually you just need to sort of take a break, step back, and cool off. But mind-boggling how so many athletes down under tend to play year-round. They might take a week off here or there, but it's not like they're taking the 8-month off that we do for the winter.
Well, I was talking to a gentleman, a good bowler. He's here today, and he's playing. I know his first game he played very well. He said he'd love to have an indoor bowling facility the quality of Vancouver here in the GTA. He believes it would make him a much better bowler because of the ability to play mostly year-round. He has played up in Richmond Green, but it means it's another 3/4 of an hour travel. Each way. That's a bit of a deterrent.
The downside with trying to get an indoor done is just the upfront cost of doing that. It's not quite as easy as saying provide 50,000 this year and 20,000 next year. It's to get the construction actually going if you want a high quality facility. If there's not one that already exists, to actually build the building or to bring in the carpenter, what have you, is usually a large cost up front. I guess you could maybe amortize it over a few years, but it's not cheap, and that's the downfall.
Yeah. Well, I think, though, once again, when we talk about the evolution of the game, we've got to think differently. Maybe we don't build a building. Maybe we go and take an old warehouse that's 60,000 square feet that they haven't been able to sell for some time, and we do some renovations. Usually a building that, let's say, 60,000 square feet, big building, it will have a lot of parking because it was a factory that had a lot of employees or something, or a distribution center, a lot of employees, a lot of cars. I think we've got to work with the municipalities and local government, and as well as the provincial and national. I think we've got to make the case for a sportsplex. It just can't be bowls. I don't think bowls can support its own building. Back in England, going back to Ellen Faulkner's conversation, she said that she thought it had to be a sportsplex, even with childminding possibilities, with a neat restaurant, with maybe a swimming pool, basketball court, or a gym. You've got to think it differently. So bowls of its own probably wouldn't produce the revenue to pay the interest charges, but a sportsplex might, because you've got multiple sports going on. But for me, if we had such a thing, I'd like to see it fashioned in a way that we had, let's say, a minimum of 3 outdoor greens, as plus as the indoor, so that we don't walk away from the natural turf. I think that would be a total mistake. I think that's the right thinking. So with this intense heat, Jake, do you think the green speed is significantly different? Because I've noticed this last couple of heads is not as tight as the ones we had an hour and a half ago when it was just a tad cooler. It's gotten hotter since we've been sitting here.
Yeah.
According to the app on the on the telephone here.
I think that could have played a factor. I'm told that the greens have been picking up pace all week, that they've been getting faster and faster each and every day. But I think another factor is also the fact that we took a short 5-10 minute break there, and sometimes even just sitting down for 5 to 10 minutes can make all the difference in the world. You can lose the touch, lose the feeling, or whatever it is. Another sort of interesting anecdote, I guess, from Game 1 to Game 2. Game 1, there were a whackload of little black bugs. I don't know what they were that were on the greens that every time the ball was rolling down would disturb 100 or 200 of them, and I don't see them at all this game here. So I don't know if the bugs actually would have made any difference pace-wise or anything like that, but the fact that they're gone makes me think that maybe the green's getting too hot for them to be burrowing on or living on or what have you. So I would have to think that you're right. The pace has probably picked up a little bit just based on the heat factor.
Yep. Might be starting to change the
draw lines too.
Yeah. So while we're talking in general, and we're fortunate enough to be in the shade watching this, I notice the flies are biting us. What's the one quality you might have, in your view, if you were a lead, a vice, or a skip? What's the one single quality? They may be the same, they may be different, but what if you had to rank for each position, what would you say is most important?
By quality, do you mean a specific skill, lawn bowling related, or quality as just a human trait?
As a team player, you need to fill out the rest of the sentence. As a team player, the lead must be able to get within 2 inches of the jack. the vice must be able to correct the problems that didn't get sorted out in the first. As a skip, you must be able to hold the team together. It may be a different quality. You may not have to be the best bowler because the first two in the front end did something good for you, but you've got to hold the team together when you're. So it's a tough question to answer. I think that's what you're saying. Tough question.
Yeah.
But there might be something, and these black flies might decide to boogaloo off because they're biting pretty good. I don't know if you've had anything.
Yeah, no, I've had these flies landing on me and taking chunks out too. But to sort of answer a question you didn't ask and then get back to the one you did ask, a big trait I think is not showing your emotions, and that's particularly important in singles games. I know I've won many a game from people who get too emotional, and so when they're frustrated they end up kicking a bowl into the ditch, or if they're nervous. One game I played in, the fellow's hands were shaking as he was measuring, and when I see signs like that, that just motivates me even more and think, oh, I've got this game in the bag then. But that's, I think, more important for singles than any other position, because if you're nervous or angry at lead or what have you, then the rest of the team can still pick you up. But I think you're right that it doesn't necessarily need to be the best player at skip. I strongly think that your vice is probably your most multifaceted player, I guess, has the most tricks in his tool bag. I'm a strong believer of that the vice should probably clear the head up so that the skip can draw in if need be. So your skip probably shouldn't need to blast too much. And I've heard some stats from Lachlan and others saying that the skip only needs to throw or be successful, I guess, 35% of the time to win. But your front end needs to be much more successful in order to give your team a chance. So I've played on fours teams where they sort of blew up, I guess, front end and back end. Didn't get along. Team just dynamics weren't quite there. And I found the vice position to be very connective, I guess, connecting the front end to the back end. And I think the vice needs to be not just your most tools in the toolbox skill-wise, but also managing the team, I think, of team dynamic, of keeping everybody involved, most motivational, I guess. While some people would probably argue with me on that and say that's the skip's job to keep the team involved, keep the team motivated.
Yeah, I can hear you.
I guess that's more potent, I guess, in a fours game than anything else, just because the vice goes back and forth from calling the head to being down with the front end, whereas the skip's never really down with the lead, except when you pass by. You're not really there all the time necessarily. But yeah, that's a tricky question. I'm not really sure how to answer that.
But once again, if you were trying to be instructive and helpful for a bunch of people around a table, and you're having your water or your coffee, and these kind of questions will come up. And they deserve to come up. Because some people have aspirations of being a skip too soon. And they haven't spent their time being a lead. And that's natural. I get that. I understand that. But if you could somehow say, look, it's not only is it important, it's the foundation of the head. You get there and you put the bowls there. I've got something to work with, and they feel good. But if they're just like when I first started a few years ago, I was told to get off the green as lead and go and sit in the back. Well,
I've heard that many a time, which I'm not a fan of at all.
No, and so what happens is that's a great way to enthuse me, right? No. And you want me to do what? Or I'm reminded of the time when I wasn't finding my line. And I was skinny across the front of the jack, and the guy, the skip, was a bit frustrated. He said, "I told you what to do," and he yelled at me in such a fashion. I said, "Well, I'll show you what I can do," and I made it worse. And I said, he kept walking off the green. I said, it's hard to play with somebody who's not patient. So the skip has got, to me, is the chief executive, the one
Mhm.
that's got to be, whereas the vice is more the general manager. The general manager's got
Mm.
around him and make things
Yes.
happen.
Yes.
And the lead is more the person that's got to say, well, look, someone's got to do the the grunt work. Someone's got to be the
Do the heavy lifting. Yeah.
do the heavy lifting, and I quite enjoy it, and they do it, and they do it well. Freddie Warbank's a good example
Yes. Yes.
of he doesn't have aspirations to be skipped that I'm aware of, but his telephone doesn't stop ringing. He could play with any team.
Mhm.
If he put his shingle out and said, I want to play with any team that the first to call, I'll consider all offers. He would have a busy time answering all the calls. But how do you then say to a new bowler, go and sit in the back of, get away from the head. When I'm measuring, you're not supposed to watch what I'm doing.
Yeah, that drives me batty when I hear stuff like that.
Yeah.
Get the team involved. It's a team game.
It's a team game, that's right. So what's happening here? Saskatchewan?
It's Quebec
Yes.
that's got a couple of Red Bulls that are dangerously close.
And the score is,
It's 15-11 for Quebec right now.
yeah.
And here's another Quebec one into the pile. Looks like they're holding 3, maybe 4.
Well, with such a wide head, Jake, you should be able to, your skip should be able to land one and at least do the cut down, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If not make the shot.
Lots of holes, lots of gaps. It doesn't matter what the green is playing right now. You should be able to get.
Find your way through.
Yeah,
that.
find your way through that.
Well, here's the ball that looks like it has found its way through.
Yeah, that's exactly what you need from your skip. That'll
Yep.
be shot itself.
I think so.
Beautiful bowl.
Yep. Well, it's been well answered, though.
Yeah, that will not quite be enough.
I
It's
don't
close.
think-
but
I think you're right. Signal was that Saskatchewan's still holding. Quebec has got the hammer here.
So this can be a very frustrating point right now if you're Quebec, because you've got 4 seconds, maybe even not just 4 seconds, but not shot. And that can sometimes just be enough to really.
You got to change hands, I think. I think that last ball might have taken the line away, and she's got to come on her backhand,
Mhm.
surely. She
Yeah,
is. She may be a bit skinny on it. She is, but she might get that wick. She didn't. So there's a lot of trying. No, she doesn't have the hammer. Okay, so Saskatchewan's got another opportunity here.
Yeah, definitely need to try to maximize points here.
That's right.
Not a whole lot of room to draw, but very possible.
This is an interesting ball coming up. She may have done it. She did it. I think she picked up. I think that was good bowling. We'll see.
One for sure. Not sure if she got 2 out of that or not. She pushed that shot pull.
Yep.
I'm not sure they'll
Looks like
measure it for sure.
It looks like a measure. Oh, they're conceding. Yeah, they conceded that the measure is 2-2 Saskatchewan.
So that makes it 15-13 with 3 to go. So this is a down to the wire finish.
Mm-hmm.
Dave Anderson's letting us know that Freddie Walbank has a silver in nationals as a skip, which is interesting.
Well,
because
thank you, David. Wow.
Interesting because he's primarily known for leading, just because that's where most people see him at. Although I do recall back in the day he used to be playing, I believe it was second when John Devonshire was still active and involved. That would have been probably over a decade ago now, I guess.
Well, it's interesting that we heard from David. He has a wealth of knowledge at his fingertips because he's been there, done that, and he's played a lot with Freddie, of course. And it's great to get corrected. I don't mind being corrected when you're dealing with somebody. I'm confident that he knows what he's talking about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
At the Nationals last year, I think David was the coach for Ontario, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. Yes, he was. He was the team manager there.
Team manager, coach, and by all accounts, he did an excellent job.
Good old Victoria. I found it very interesting that in my time with Bulls Canada, I started in 2016, and the majors then were at the Commonwealth Club in Alberta, which is the 4-deck. And then the next year it was at Juan de Fuca in Victoria, which is a 4-deck, and here we are today at Regina, which is a 4-deck. So 3 years in a row I got to see all three of Canada's biggest greens, which was quite a delight because I haven't been to any of them before.
Mm-hmm.
Nice little cycle.
Well, one could only say that that was an interesting bowl. See what the answer is here. The answer looks like it's going to go much the same distance.
Yeah, almost matching bowl for bowl here, not quite.
Yeah, just inside. No problems there.
We'll see if Lorraine takes some weight off, and I think she has. I think this is a much better weight adjustment.
Oh, very good weight adjustment. Just a tad short.
A little bit wide, too. That didn't want to come back and finish back to the center line.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is probably one of the first misjudged bowls in a while from Quebec. They've been challenging, at least from my perspective, they've been challenging. I don't know about you. And there's one up front. See what this is all about. See the potassium eaters walking by. Potassium eaters, hello, hello. What's that? What's what she said?
I think she was saying we should be out in the sun too. We should take the tent away. I can tell you that I'd be pretty sunburnt without this tent.
Yes.
Burn quite quickly. This is a bit of a looser end here again. Again, lots of gaps and holes for the skips to weasel their way through.
Yeah.
But that can be sometimes be tricky with all the bowls in front. Seeing them there, sometimes you end up focusing on that and then end up crashing on short bowls.
Well, for sure, and especially that green one from I guess it's Saskatchewan. My understanding of the bowl about that far out from the jack, the bowl in your mind's eye looms several times larger.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you can just stop visualizing and focusing on it, you can do that. That's excellent.
That's
ball.
a beautiful bowl. I guess getting back to sort of our visualization things, I've been listening to a lot of speeches from a guy named Simon Sinek, and he's a very
I know Simon Sinek. Yeah.
very great motivational speaker, I think.
Yeah.
And so he was talking in one of his speeches about
Hey, look at this bowl.
oh, what a beautiful bowl there from Anne.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Or sorry, from Susan. That's Susan Hills. Your skip. So he was talking about how your brain can't process negative thoughts, and to use that as an example, he said, "Don't think of an elephant." And so naturally, your brain thinks of an elephant because it
Correct.
doesn't understand don't. So he went on to say that you know how downhill skiers are going very fast, and there's so many trees, and if you ask them how do you avoid all the trees, you're going at such a fast pace, and they say, well, I don't look at the trees, I look at the path. As soon as I look at a tree, I'm going to hit that tree and smack and get hurt. So I just don't look at the trees, like I don't even see them. All I see is the path down the hill. And I feel like that applies very much to bowls with short bowls. Just don't look at the short bowls, just see the path where your bowl is going, and you'll be fine. But as you said, quite often people end up seeing that bowl that's short and it becomes 10 times bigger than it actually is, and sure enough, they crash on it.
Yeah. Well, that gentleman, Simon Sinek, I had the opportunity to at least have a conversation with him. What a wonderful wick!
What a result, and the flop behind too.
Yeah,
Wow.
Yeah. He, I had the opportunity to bring a motivational speaker in for an event.
Mm-hmm.
So I contacted his office, and the price was a little bit astronomical. But I was fascinated by him. I think he's a good thinker.
Mm-hmm.
But he was not affordable. He asked a big dollar.
Mm. So one Saskatchewan for sure, and they're gonna look, but I think it might just be the one.
I think it looks the one. From here, we've got the disadvantage of angle, but the measuring, interesting. That's the angle that is deceiving to us, Jake. Some people measure just to measure, so they don't want to be accused of by their teammates that they haven't done the job properly. But it certainly looked like only one from where we were. The rink next to us, Ontario and Alberta.
Can't quite see the score there. 19-6 for Alberta.
Yeah.
Coming onto the last end.
Yeah. Ontario tried to fight back, but Alberta also said they're not going to give in and picked up a couple.
Rink beside them is 11-8 for Saskatchewan over Manitoba, also women's pairs. Looks like we have a long end here. This is going right to the tee. I'm always curious if it's a inadvertent whoops or an actual strategy tactic with a lot of jack placements, I guess. We talked about this last game, Terry and I, about how jack rolling is a very underrated skill and how a lot of players don't actually practice rolling a jack to get it to the desired length. So it makes me wonder how many leads here have actually gone and practiced rolling a jack and can actually put it within a mat length of where they want it to be. Because based off of all the tournament playing that I used to do back when I was younger, far too often leads really had no idea where they were throwing the jack. They just get up and roll it, and wherever it landed. So I'm always curious how many people are actually competent enough that they can get the jack exactly where they want it, or if it's just sort of a whoops.
Well, I think from what I take from my bowls mentor, my dad, and the book he writes a lot about throwing the jack. He says it's one of the most critical shots in bowls. Not only does it give you your team a sense of what's going on and weight, but it does help you understand momentum. You talk about momentum. So that rolling of the first one, you want to put it in the ditch, or you want to move the mat up and then roll the jack, and it's a big part of the strategy. It's not taught as a new bowler training.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're just told to roll the jack, and wherever it goes, it goes. The only thing I wish when rolling the jack would be that we had lines that were very easy to just go and place it, instead of this business of measuring, kind of just kick it over, kick it over, kick it over, kick it over.
Yeah.
It's such a waste of time. Not so much a waste of time, it's a momentum. You feel like you want to roll the jack, get on and roll the ball.
Mm-hmm.
But I think to your point, I think that more could be taught about rolling the jack and the strategies, and if you ditch the jack, it goes to the opponent.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly what you may want to do. Find out what their comfortable length is very quickly.
Yeah, I guess first end that might be a strategy.
Yeah, you might want to, And what about the time? I was reading somewhere where the guy told his bowlers, don't put anything in front of the jack and nothing behind the jack unless it's near the ditch. And then I'm going to pick up the jack and I'm just going to take it back just so it doesn't drop in the ditch. We're going to score 7. So people play games, in other words, or they play strategies that they hope will work.
Mm-hmm.
But I repeat myself to your point about people understanding the importance of rolling the jack. I don't think there's enough taught about it. It's like the drive shot, or what I've come to call the blaster. I was in Australia playing in the Open, and they had Bestor's blaster Windsor, what is it, the Blue Opal or something?
Yeah, the blue opal pairs or something like that.
Something like that, yeah. And I thought, well, that's the word. He'd blast them down there. Not many people understand how to have that in your arsenal, but not use it unless it's absolutely critical. Some people use it. Oh, okay, I've got to drive. Well, in my humble opinion, it's still a draw game. And this guy just put down a blaster. I don't know that he's done anything. No one jumped up and down, and near missed everything. But great delivery of the drive shot, absolutely beautiful. And but missed by a hair. It's missed by a mile.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, this is a very close game here that we're watching on the between Quebec and Saskatchewan. It's both teams are fighting it out. This must be an interesting bowl coming in here.
Ooh, just coming up a little bit short.
It looks to be, but she got a clap.
I think she might have scored 2 out of this. 2 Quebec is what I'm thinking right now.
Well, you don't take someone else's ball off too quickly, like she did. She scored the 2 to Quebec. Yeah, she was very quick in picking those up, so I figured,
Mm-hmm.
17-14. And this is for all the tea in China.
All the tea in China.
One thing, Terry Scott is here, and he's come up with a couple of down under expressions, which I find I haven't heard those for a while. It's kind of neat to
rehear them again.
To listen to them again and hear them, and his accent is much more pronounced than mine, of course. Is Jeff Harding, do you know, had a chance to catch up with Terry Scott? Both New Zealanders, and but I don't know if Jeff's been around much these days. But
Yeah, I haven't seen Jeff since, gosh, I don't even know, 2015, 2016 maybe? It's been a few years since I've seen him.
I think he got busy with work, and he does play the league, Monday morning league, in the area. Sometimes, not all the time. Well, there's another well-delivered
What a
ball.
beautiful opening bowl there.
Yes, it is.
Well played, Anne.
At this juncture in the game, that's all you can ask for.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, here's a good answer coming, but won't be enough, I don't think. Great line, and just came up short. So with your work at Bowls Canada, do you get much of a chance to truly get out and play bowls now? Or are you on a hiatus or something?
I'm on a hiatus, but it's by choice. So I play WOBA every year. That's my one tournament that I commit to. So I take 4 or 5 days off, travel back to Kitchener, and play in that 3-day men's tournament. But I did join the Nepean Club this year, but part of that was just so we could actually run the youth camp thing that we were doing. But I also joined that with the intent that I might play in the district singles playdowns this year, because Ottawa does them a year in advance. So come the end of September, that's when they'll do their playdowns for the 2019 provincial singles. So I'll see if I can break through for that, and then if I do, then I'll play in the Ontario playdowns for the singles in 2019. But that being said, if I don't make it through, I'm put out of my misery before the 2019 even starts, which is kind of interesting the way that Ottawa does that. But yeah, no, I mean, I could be down at Nepean any night I wanted to, but more by choice than anything else. It's something I didn't really want to do, is work 9 to 5 bowls and then go lawn bowling after that. I figured I'd burn out way too quickly if I ended up doing that for more than 8 hours a day.
Yeah, but there is the but.
Yeah.
And keeps you tuned and keeps you enthused, and maybe you've had enough bowls. Go home and go swimming or something.
It has been interesting the past 2 years since I haven't really bowled much aside from the one tournament that I do. It's sort of started to re-get the itch to want to actually get out and bowl a little bit more, which is why I'm doing the district playdowns this year. So we'll see if that progresses into anything more for next year. But having a 2-year hiatus, I guess, it really is eye-opening, I guess, because ever since I started at the age of 8, I've never taken a summer off before. It's always been bowling as many tournaments as you can before the year's done, because you only have 4 months, so make it count while you can. So yeah, it's been very, very eye-opening is the best way I can put that for what a summer is like when you're not bowling, playing in tournaments. It's I do miss it. I do miss going to all the tournaments down in southwestern Ontario, Niagara Falls, Burlington, Kitchener, London, what have you. But now living up in Ottawa is just not quite the same. I don't think I'd feel as comfortable playing in tournaments up there.
Well, there's the Ontario Indoor Singles, which is an open at Willowdale. I think
Oh yeah, the indoor playdowns, yeah.
22nd or something. That's
Yep.
available to you.
Yeah.
On artificial green, but you've been there, done that.
Well, that might actually end up going on my bucket list for maybe next year or the year after, is to play in the indoor playdowns, because I haven't actually played at the indoors out in PIBC. I've been there and rolled bowls on the carpet, but never as the Ontario rep, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So that'll probably end up being something on the bucket list for a year or two down the line. Great weight there from Susan.
Yeah, the challenge is for Saskatchewan, they need points here, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
And they're not going to get what they want, unfortunately, I don't think. See,
Yeah, it's going to be very tricky because you need 3 to tie, and I'm not sure how you're going to get 3 out of this. A very perfect trail, but
Yes, that would be.
you would have to chip that perfectly.
Well, this bowl is probably not only. Well, I think it may take the line away over there a bit. She's coming at it. I don't think she threw it with a lot of enthusiasm. We'll see what happens. Funnier things have happened. She did something.
Wow. Wow, almost.
Oh, what a shot. Good try. That was well played.
And that was 2 for Saskatchewan to make it 17-16.
Oh.
Wowza.
They're not measuring that, so clearly they see something we don't. And the ball behind is, I guess, too far behind. Huh, I would have measured that, but anyhow, we'll see. They know more than we know. What do we know? Well, it was a good game.
It was, right down to the last bowl pretty much. So thanks for commentating with me there, Ian.
Jake, you're a good man. Appreciate the opportunity. I enjoyed it.
Good stuff. And we'll be back. Let's see, what time does that next round start at? Round 3, which will be Ontario A versus Ontario B on the same rink here at 4:30 local time, which is about an hour from now. Yeah, women's pairs, Ontario A versus Ontario B. They're playing on
A versus B. What a good game that could be.
Could be. So that's about an hour from now. So we'll be back then. So tune back in then.
Okay. See you later, everyone.